In this lesson, we're going to differentiate between some terms that are confusing and repeat a lot in chemistry. And they are the atoms, the elements, the compounds, and the molecules. We'll start with the atoms, as they are the smallest one and they can be the building block of all the other types. So atoms are responsible for creating elements, the compounds, and the molecules, as well as any other matter that exists. An atom consists of three tinier particles than itself, and they are the electrons, the protons, and the neutrons. The number of protons determine what type of element do we have, and what kind of atoms we're having to form this element. The protons are found in the nucleus of the atom. So if a nucleus has 6 protons, then it's a carbon atom. If it has 1 proton, then it's a hydrogen atom. And so on it goes. Each atom has its own atomic properties. So these atoms bond together and join each other to form the elements, the compounds, and the molecules. The different groups of elements in the periodic table are made up of different number of atoms. Let's say we have 2 atoms. These 2 atoms are both hydrogen atoms. Then it's that simple. As long as they're the same atom, then they're forming an element. So by joining 2 atoms of hydrogen, an element of hydrogen is formed. And see that the name of an element is always a single word. A hydrogen, an oxygen, iron. So elements are always found in one word, unlike the compounds and some types of molecules. Let's give another example for an element, and then we'll be forming a compound with both of the elements. Let's say we have an atom that consists of 6 protons. Well, we know that this is a carbon atom, right? Carbon is a monoatomic element, which means it's only made up of 1 atom. Now we have different atoms here, right? We have hydrogen atoms and we have carbon atoms. Let's try to create a compound using the hydrogen atoms and the carbon atoms. If we take 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 carbon atom, then you know what compound it forms? It forms a methylene. And you know what else is a compound? Water, carbon dioxide are all compounds. Now water molecule has a formula of H2O, that's 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. So that became clear, right? Whenever we have atoms of different elements that are joined together in a fixed ratio, then it's called a compound. What remains are the molecules. It gets a little tricky here, but we'll try to make it as clear as possible. When it comes to molecules, I'd like to separate them into 2 parts. The first one being the substances that can be a molecule, and the second one being the substances that cannot be a molecule. So the 2 parts here differentiates between what you can call a molecule and what you cannot call a molecule. A molecule is a group of 2 or more atoms. The atoms here are either the same atoms or different atoms. So for example, hydrogen. It's composed of 2 hydrogen atoms forming a hydrogen element, right? Well, at the same time, this element is also called a molecule. Sulfur, for example, is another element that's composed of 8 atoms. Well, we mentioned that the molecules are a group of 2 or more atoms, right? A group of 2 hydrogen atoms forming a hydrogen element is also a molecule. And a group of 8 sulfur atoms forming a sulfur element is also a molecule. Remember we talked about compounds? They were made up of different types of atoms. And we also said that the atoms in a molecule are either of the same types of elements or different types, right? So the compound of water, which is made up of different types of atoms, is also a molecule. Now we know the types of elements and compounds that can be molecules, but we also have some exceptions. Some elements cannot form a molecule because they can exist in a 1 atom form, like helium for example, or any type of atom that exists only by itself, So one hydrogen atom or one oxygen atom is not considered as a molecule. Compounds like NaCl are also not molecules because they are made up of ions. Ions are the charged form of atoms.